So thank you everyone for being here today. We're here to discuss how remittances are increasing resilience in Latin America. I'm Mallory Bolter. I lead the global impact work at Remitly. For those who are not familiar with Remitly, we're a global cross-border financial services company. I'll be moderating today's panel, and I'm thrilled to be joined by experts from our partners at Mercy Corps and Axion. And they'll be sharing more in just a few minutes about some of the solutions that we are growing together in the region. Before we begin with the panel, I wanted to share just a few data points and a customer story, really to set the stage for you to understand the importance of what we'll be talking about today. So first, when a storm is coming, having funds available can mean the difference between safety and loss. At Remitly, we hear from our customers every single day who are sending funds to their loved ones for emergency reasons, many who are preparing for a disaster, oftentimes for recovering after. We recently heard from Ruth, who is a customer who sends to El Salvador, and she sends to her mother, oftentimes for emergencies. Prior to digital innovation, her mother used to have to travel miles to the supermarket and to pharmacies to be able to collect her funds. Now, as a result of digital innovation, she is able to receive those funds on her digital card, which is incredible. That means that she can receive funds immediately and use them for anything like preparing for a disaster or for things like using medicine after the fact. This emphasizes and highlights not only how impactful and important remittances are as a tool for resilience, but also the importance of sending and receiving funds quickly, securely, and safely. And yet, even with the tremendous progress that has been made, there is still more work to be done. In a recent article published by the Center for Financial Inclusion, they highlighted that in the last 3 years, 1 in 4 adults has experienced a natural disaster. And of those, 2/3 of individuals sadly lost income or assets as a result. And when we look even more closely at regions that are most impacted by climate events, over 1/2 of adults reported that they were not able to cover an unexpected expense. Yet we have the opportunity to partner together to change that. And that's why I'm so excited to be here to talk with my partners from Mercy Corps and Axion. Remittances remain one of the most reliable, dependable, and impactful sources for households, particularly in this region, and especially in times of uncertainty. And so in this moment, that creates an amazing opportunity for us to innovate together so that we can use remittances and support families to be able to help move them from loss to recovery, and all the way through to financial health and resilience. And finally, when we focus in on the importance to the region, there are a few things I'll just cover. The first is that remittances don't just arrive after the fact. Decades of research has shown that they increase savings, boost recovery, and oftentimes act like informal insurance. In fact, just last year in 2024, $160 billion was sent into Latin America and the Caribbean, with Mexico alone reaching over $60 billion. And this year, for the first half of 2025, in many of the areas in the region, those amounts have continued to grow up to 20 to 25%. Even more importantly, when we think about the impact to the region in terms of GDP, while many around the world, many countries receive remittances contributing anywhere from 2 to 10%, in this region specifically, and especially the Northern Triangle, remittances can represent 20% of GDP, highlighting not only their importance, but their tremendous ability to have an outsized impact on the region. And finally, these flows contribute to well-being. One of the things that I've learned having worked at Remitly is that our customers really view remittances not as discretionary, but things that they do every day. And what this means is that even in economic uncertainty or international aid declines, remittances remain a primary, dependable, and reliable source of funds supporting communities, especially during uncertain times. At Remitly, we understand the importance of this, and that's why we're so excited to partner with folks at Axion and Mercy Corps to really innovate together. In today's panel, we'll be talking about 2 examples. The first, with Mercy Corps, is an anticipatory action pilot where we are supporting the ability for our customers to send their funds into the region in advance, really testing remittances as a proactive source of finance. And the second with Axion, who is leading the conversation and work in the region around inclusive and digital payments, where Alex and I will be talking about the importance of speed. and we're thrilled to support Axion through the work of the Remitly Foundation. Both of these examples are great examples of how when we bring together the public and private sector, backed by strong technology innovation and policies, we can work together to help families and loved ones and communities prepare and adapt during uncertain times and during crisis. And with that, we'll go ahead and move to the panel. And as we do, I would love to hear from those in the audience around live solutions that you're seeing to build resilience, as well as any questions that you have. And with that, we'll move to Mercy Corps. Alma, you and the Mercy Corps team have been leading the pilot work on anticipatory action. Can you share about how this model works and the new approach that we've been taking together this year?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Mallory, for introducing this panel. Hi, everyone. My name is Alma Besares Calderon, and I work with Mercy Corps on research linked to climate adaptation, migration, and displacement. And before I answer your question, Mallory, I think it's important that I define what anticipatory action is. And well, it refers to a set of tools and resources that are used proactively to prevent or mitigate the effects of a disaster, right? Now, as you mentioned, remittances are great at improving the resilience of households. And there's evidence out there that shows that remittance senders, the diaspora, are one of the first ones to respond in the face of a disaster. So the underlying question of this project is whether remittances can be used as an anticipatory action tool. And the way we're doing it is more explicitly is just by analyzing whether we can nudge customers to send remittances before an event happens. And for this project, we are focusing on hurricanes. And we are focusing on households based in the US who usually send remittances to Guatemala, El Salvador, or Honduras. So basically, we have a two-step model. So first, in partnership with Remitly, we developed these resource guides, both in English and Spanish. And we shared at the beginning of the hurricane season, we shared those guides with households that usually send remittances to these countries, either in English or in Spanish, based on the language that they set up in their Remitly app. And then after this, the second stage, we rely on an algorithm that was developed by a team at Mercy Corps and that is powered by machine learning that sends us a message whenever there is a credible threat for a hurricane hitting the region. After that, we corroborate the information, we get the systems in place, and once we know that there's an imminent hurricane approaching the region, then Remitly sends a message to their customers. So the way we are looking at this nudge is either like Remitly sends information, like an early warning message, and then to another group, they also send just some targeted discounts, right? And with that, we want to learn under what circumstances households send remittances, and then what type of message and financial incentive is more effective at just ensuring that households can send funds to their loved ones in any of these countries.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Alma. And I really appreciate, as you know, the two-step process we've been taking this year. So when we first did the pilot a few years ago, we focused primarily on how can incentives really drive action. And in this case, exactly to what you're saying, does messaging and education in itself really encourage shifting that timing, as well as the fact that resources in themselves are just so important in helping communities prepare. So thank you for sharing. Before we move on to my next question, Alex, I know when we were talking about this pilot, you had some examples from Guatemala as well. So wanted to pause to see if you wanted to weigh in.
Yes, thank you, Mallory. Here in Guatemala, we had a very interesting experience in 2018 concerning remittances, but the example is about innovation. We had a disaster that affected thousands of people. They were trapped. They couldn't leave their homes. People were isolated, and the first thing you cannot do is purchase your data package, right? So they were incommunicated. What happened, and it's very interesting, is that we saw an increase of the data plans being as a gift from the US. 95% of people were receiving data packages from the US. So this is a great example that it's not always just about money, it's just sending the correct asset that people need, right? And something that we have learned in Acción with this example and other examples is that remittances are not just about sending money, it's about sending hope, right, in the end, for people. So thank you.
Such a good example, and honing in on that last point too. One, really incredible to know about the data and just the different types of aid and support. But I think most importantly, what you're saying, which is how do we listen and learn from communities who can tell us exactly what they need? And in this case, something like data, which might, at its first value, potentially not be something that comes to mind, but exactly what you're saying, how do we ensure that the solutions really are relevant? And a stat that always stands out to me about why this matters, and I do see a question in the chat, which I'll address really quickly, which is, what is the time frame in which you analyze the need of remittances to enable the channels to send? So usually what happens is we activate after a disaster, and our customers are sending all the time. What this pilot is doing is to say, can we get those funds at that time or in advance? And so, as Alma mentioned, we'll receive warnings through Mercy Corps about 48 hours before, and those 48 hours are really impactful. And the stat I mentioned that really stands out is in research, it shows that for every dollar you invest before a disaster, so even if it was 48 hours before, can save $6 in loss. So when we think about the magnitude of the number of billions of dollars, as I mentioned, 160 billion went into the region, you can think about the outsized impact that has. So Alma, moving on to the next question, would you be able to share more about how this model works on the ground and what you're learning, as well as how you're thinking about measuring the impact?
Yes, absolutely, Mallory. And I think that what you just, the question that we just had, I think everything kind of connects, right? So at this point, we haven't had a disaster activation yet. But we have all the systems in place, which I think it's already a great milestone because, of course, I mean, this requires a lot of coordination and a great partnership. So yeah, just like collaborating with Remitly, we have everything in place. But from the research that we have conducted already and that we are currently conducting as well in Guatemala, we know that people actually prefer to receive remittances in advance of a hurricane. And that's exploratory findings of a study we conducted specifically in 2 regions in Guatemala. But we know that even if it's just to have that security, that information, that they will have something to respond to these disasters. So they do prefer that. And then currently we are analyzing a little bit more like in another project, we are looking at, well, what are some of the mechanisms that actually help people just to get more resilient vis-a-vis these climate disasters, and more specifically hurricanes, but also droughts, and just how these effects are combined. So just going to the second part of your question, well, we are after we are able to kind of just conduct this study, we're going to be able to gather some data to identify some patterns on how just basically like sending patterns from remittance senders to these regions. And then we're also going to just have a questionnaire that is going to be sent to these senders in which we're going to be learning more about how they know these remittances were used and the importance of them, either mitigating or preventing some of the shocks that we have. And the idea with that is like just really to understand how this knowledge, how this information can really limit and help households prepared for these disasters, but also how can we ensure that these remittances can help as a way to prevent or mitigate the effects of these disasters.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And 2 points I'll recap that I thought were so important. The first one, in terms of trends with anonymized data, to say what can we learn, which I think is great, around how do we continuously improve and innovate and think about and understand how to further support communities and partner with them. And then the second one around what you were saying with surveys, which is how can we actually get the information to, again, listen and learn directly from the communities, which I think can be really, really powerful to partner alongside them. And to Alex's earlier point around what really, really resonates. So thank you so much for that. Looking forward to continuing to partner with you and then learn more as your research is published. So shifting to a related topic with Axion around the importance of secure digital and instant transfers, which are such a critical part of this work. Excited to introduce Alex, who is leading some of this work in Axion. And one stat I'll share is that back in 2022, there was a market study done with remittances, and 40% of the individuals who responded shared that they send in emergency reasons. And so when we think about ways to innovate in this space, thinking about speed and security, I think, is really at the heart of that work. And that is work that Alex is leading in the region. So with that, Alex, from your perspective, how are innovations in payment systems supporting household resilience? And if you can share more about the work that you're leading in Latin America.
Sure, Mallory, thank you. I'll take some time to introduce myself very quickly. My name is Alex or Alejandro Amorin. I work with Axion Advisory in Latin America. I'm based in Guatemala, where we partner with financial institutions and fintechs, mainly to help them access finance for underserved populations. At Axion, what we do is we focus designing and scaling solutions, digital financial solutions and remittances is like one of the main verticals that we are focusing right now. It's like at the heart of our work right now in Axion. So with your question, Mallory, the payment innovations that we are seeing happening linked to household resilience, one is speed. Speed as resilience is like very, very important. Why? Because we see like this instant and digital payments, like families can access the funds very, very fast. And so that makes them adaptive instead of reactive, right? And this also makes them less vulnerable. So that's the first one I would say. The second attribute is lower costs, broader reach. So this is linked with mobile wallets, obviously, and making the transactions cheaper and more accessible. And then you can expand. Right now, you know that if here in Guatemala and other economies, remittances go to agent networks or just as a cash out in banks. So mobile wallets take a great value for customers on getting those costs lowered. And linking payments to other financial tools, right? So you can access savings, credit, insurance products, instead of being isolated just remittances money, and then people don't actually get included as financial products. And I would say for the last element, resilience comes through this inclusion, right? These innovations expand formal financial participation from the rural area and underserved segments, meaning that more women, more micro MSMEs, small merchants can build these assets and grow their businesses. So this is very, very important, and it strengthens the resilience of the community as well. And I would maybe end up this question, Mallory. Payment innovations are transforming remittances. We would say from survival money into resilience engine. It's like very important that concept, and that's like exactly the kind of things that we at Axion are trying to work with our partners and push through in Latin America.
It's a great overview, and thank you for covering so many points. I mean, there's so much there. I think to your point, the importance of speed. It's always really interesting to me too, because I think speed is critical when we think about timing, but it's also critical for trust, which we know is, to your point around access and participation in formal financial services, a critical part. And so it's incredible to see with things like mobile wallets, how something that used to take days is pretty much instantaneous. Like I can pick up my phone and probably faster than a WhatsApp message will send to you, you'll receive, the payment into the region, especially with mobile wallets really leapfrogging the banking system. So great to see that. And then to your point, how to take that a step further to say, okay, remittances and cross-border transfers are reaching the region. How do we really drive adoption and use and make them really relevant through things like what you're saying around payment systems, and how to really then drive adoption out to that last mile into rural areas? So super critical. And I think the thing that always comes to mind with me is how do we continue to do that backed by strong KYC and strong, fraud control, scam prevention, all of those things that come along with instant payments. So switching to an adjacent topic, over the summer, you convened leaders in Bogota to discuss Colombia's new instant payment system. Can you share about how instant payment systems specifically are really strengthening financial health, and more about this convening?
Yes, great question. So we can take an example in Colombia with this Breve initiative that was pushed like a couple of months ago. This enables a 24/7 low-cost real-time transfers, right, ecosystem in Colombia. And with this, Breve is creating the foundation where families can send money abroad or locally in Colombia instantly and very fast. The KYC is solved, the token, the ID for the people that you send money, it's very easy. So then you lower all of the barriers that people might get when sending money locally or receiving from abroad. And this is happening not just in Colombia, but in several economies, right? And it's at some point, it will be the new standard globally. And it's happening, and we're living it here in Latin America. They're shifting remittances into an immediate process. And this is like, for me, it's like the king of value generation in remittances and in payments, being immediate. I would maybe finalize mentioning that instant payments build trust in the digital ecosystem. And this trust is essential because when people don't trust the system, don't trust the transaction, don't trust where they're leaving their information, nothing will happen. So something that our economies need, and we need, is this like kind of access with a married figure with trust. So people need to adopt and use services and get the right customer experience for people to move money quickly, cheaply, and securely, I would say. So this is like some of the takeaways from the event that we had. Thank you, Mallory.
So great to see. And I don't have the article up, but we can share after the session. There was also that great publication you just released that talks a lot about this. And that emphasis on trust, I think, is so important. We were having a conversation about that before the panel around how do you really move from access to adoption as we think about resilience and financial health, and really being able to continue to have that trust building, which takes time, right? And I think especially with technology, the theme I've been hearing a lot in talking to our partners is technology with the human touch, which is to say, how can you keep people at the center of all of this work, even amongst all of the amazing unlocks that digital innovation and technology has? And exactly to what you're saying, Alex, to keep trust at the center. And so looking into the questions in the chat, I think that actually tees up one that Natalia has here, where she asks, where do you see the potential for AI to drive change? And so, Alex, perhaps I'll start with you, and then Alma, I'll go to you next.
Sure. Sorry, I was in mute. I think potential for AI to drive change is in information, is in education, and is in getting the right extraction of information from customers and creating the right product for people, right? So being able to tailor-made different offerings for customers fast, because sometimes without AI, what happens is it takes 6 months for you, as you know, inside your company, to develop that. With AI, you can do it in weeks, right? You get all of the technical elements very fast. So I think that's one. And returning to education, with AI, you can create experiences for customers, different experiences where they learn and they tying up to that trust, where they learn and they can trust in financial services, also in remittances, right? And so yeah, I'm going to pause there because maybe someone wants to mention another question.
Those are great examples. And as we were talking about, I think, especially when it comes to education and breaking down that barrier of trust, really to help support folks on their journey to digital adoption, I think it's really critical in the examples that you noted, as well as I know some of the work that you're doing in Mexico, for example, around this concept, I think is really exciting to see. So Alma, how about for you? I know there's a lot that Mercy Corps is doing in this space. Where do you see the potential for AI to drive adoption?
I mean, I see it in multiple ways, right? So I think that the way we're using it in this specific project is just to help us automate these processes of just identifying whenever there is a potential threat coming, a potential hurricane approaching the region. And that way you systematize that information. But as you said, it has the human touch, because then we validate that information and ensure that wherever we send to Remitly and then they share with their customers, it's validated, and we just share information of an imminent hurricane. But I think it's linked to adoption as well. We have multiple projects at Mercy Corps linked to remittances and cash transfers overall that rely very much on AI, right? So how to automate these payments, how to automate, and it can actually be something around these lines for remittances in the future, right? So kind of something that could be more automated and just make these transfers more timely and more useful as an anticipatory action tool.
Yeah, I think those are great examples. And the one that comes to mind for me, and I see a question in the chat that's asking, how can we think beyond hurricanes into droughts and storms, is the example with Mercy Corps. And it might have been through Mercy Corps Ventures in Kenya, where you had set up the automatic transfers. So when I think it was a heat wave or a drought is forecasted to come. So again, using technology, automatically having that trigger, so the funds are automatically being sent. So then exactly to what you're saying, really able to reach those communities in new and innovative ways, especially before a disaster. I know a few years ago when we were partnering together, one of the challenges right around those events is that sometimes, electricity goes out, the Wi-Fi goes down, it can make it really challenging. So just emphasizing the combination of what we know plus what technology and AI are really going to help accelerate. And I know there's been some amazing examples across anything from predicting migration patterns to the machine learning that you're using in the pilot that we're working on together. Great. Well, I think we covered all of the questions in the chat. We have just a couple minutes left. So I'm going to close by asking you each just a closing question, which is, and we'll go Alma, then Alex, what are you most excited about in this moment?
I think just the potential, seeing the potential, right, of remittances, of just diasporas supporting their communities, and how just innovation and new technologies can facilitate those transactions. I'm looking forward just to see what happens in that arena. And working on these projects, also learning how knowledge can be useful, and then kind of just learning more about all the elements of this project is very exciting.
Thank you. Alex?
I would say partnerships is one, and another that I'm very excited is the disruption and innovation that is all to come. Things are evolving in the ecosystem. I cannot even think what it's going to be remittances in 2035, for example. It's just amazing that seeing new products, new different ways of doing businesses, and obviously adding value to the customers.
Yeah, those are great points. I was going to say the same. I mean, I think digital innovation plus the potential of bringing together, public and private sector partnerships to say, how can we really, and exactly what both of you were saying, how do we meet communities where they're at with real products and services that can drive change? And I think we like to say at Remitly, we're just getting started. And I would say it it'll be incredible to see where we can go from here. So with that, we're right at time. Thank you everyone for joining. We really appreciate it. I'm super excited and very inspired by the words from Alma and Alex, and hope you are too. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.